The room smelled like old money and new carpet. That's the first thing Jade Osei noticed when she walked into the Whitmore Group's 42nd floor conference room. That specific combination of leather chairs, fresh paint, and something faintly floral that only exists in places where people are paid to make other people feel small. She was not supposed to be there, not because she didn't have clearance. She had a visitor badge clipped to the collar of her hoodie, the gray one, with a small bleach stain near the pocket that she'd been meaning to throw away for 2 years. Not because she didn't have the right building. She'd triple-checked the address on the email her cousin Marcus had forwarded her that morning with the subject line, "Just come. Trust me." She was not supposed to be there because people who looked like Jade Osei. 26, natural hair, pulled back with a rubber band, boots that had seen actual mud and not just the aesthetics of mud, did not walk into rooms like this one and stay. Usually someone asked if they were in the right place. Usually that happened within the first 30 seconds. Jade checked her watch. She'd been standing near the back wall for 45 seconds. Record. The room held maybe 60 people, all arranged in tiered seating that curved around a central presentation floor. Consultants, analysts, partners in suits that probably cost more than Jade's rent. At the front, a projection screen displayed a single slide with the Whitmore Group's logo and the words "Meridian Crisis, Day 11." Jade had read about Meridian in the news. Everyone had. A pharmaceutical supply chain failure that had left 11 regional hospital networks scrambling for a blood pressure medication that 3 million patients depended on. The FDA had flagged it. Congress had held hearings. And the Whitmore Group, the consulting firm that hospitals paid obscene retainer fees to for exactly these kinds of situations, had been working on it for 11 days and had, according to the news, made no meaningful progress. Jade was here because Marcus worked in building services on floor 38 and had accidentally overheard 2 partners arguing in a stairwell about how none of their models were working. Marcus thought that was funny. He knew what his cousin used to do for a living. Jade thought it was funny too, in the way that things are funny when they also make you a little tired. She found a seat in the back row, between a man in a charcoal blazer who did not look at her and a woman in a cream blazer who looked at her once and then looked away in that very specific way that means a decision has been made. At the front of the room, a man was speaking. His name was Douglas Whitmore. Not a partner, the partner. The man whose name was on the letterhead, whose photograph appeared in Forbes every few years, under headlines like The Fixer and The Man Company's Call When Everything Breaks. He was 60, silver-haired, with the posture of someone who had never once in his adult life been told to sit down. "We are 11 days in," Douglas said, "and I want to be direct with you. The 3 models we've run have each produced a different timeline. The network optimization framework collapsed at the 3rd variable set. The predictive redistribution model is generating outputs that contradict each other at the regional level. And the contingency supply routing, which we have staked the better part of this engagement on, has a flaw that none of you have been able to locate." He said the last part slowly. "None of you have been able to locate." The room was very quiet. "We have a client that is paying us $400,000 a week to solve this. We have 11 hospital networks that cannot get medication to their patients. And we have a problem that this firm, has not been able to crack in 11 days. He paused. "I've been in this industry for 31 years. I built this practice from 3 people and a rented office. I have never walked away from a problem. I am not going to start today." He turned to the screen behind him, where a logistics map was overlaid with a tangle of colored lines, supply routes, distribution nodes, regulatory checkpoints. It looked, from the back of the room, like someone had thrown yarn at a map and called it strategy. "This is where we are," he said. "Someone in this room finds the flaw by end of day. Or I go to the client tomorrow and tell them we failed, which is something I have never done." He looked out at the room. The room looked back. Nobody moved. Jade had been looking at the map since it appeared on the screen. She had not meant to. She had come to see Marcus for lunch, not to walk into a 60-person crisis meeting, and the last thing she needed right now was to care about a logistics problem that had nothing to do with her. But she could see it. She could see it the way she used to see things in the field. Not the whole picture at once, but the wrong thing. The thing that didn't fit. The seam where the plan came apart. It was in the third distribution cluster from the left. A supply node marked in blue, a pharmaceutical warehouse in a secondary market that the model had treated as a primary hub. If that node was running at the capacity the model assumed, the whole redistribution framework worked. If it wasn't, if someone had made a quiet assumption about that warehouse's output 6 months ago and nobody had checked it against current inventory, the whole thing collapsed. Not gradually, not partially, the whole thing. Jade looked at the map for another few seconds. Then she looked at the floor. Then she looked at the map again. She was not going to say anything. She had told herself many things in the last 3 years, and chief among them was, "You are done being the person in the room who fixes what other people broke." She had served 8 years in the Army, 4 of them in logistics and supply chain coordination in places that required security clearances, and made her good at finding the thing that didn't fit. She had come home. She had taken a job at a shipping company that bored her. She had quit. She had been figuring out what came next. She was not looking for a room like this one. But she could see it. "The third node," she said. She did not mean to say it out loud. Or maybe she did. She was never entirely sure afterward. The man in the charcoal blazer next to her turned to look at her with the expression of someone who has just heard a sound they cannot identify. At the front of the room, Douglas Whitmore stopped talking. 60 people turned to look at the back row. Jade did not move. Douglas looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that travels the whole length of a room and arrives with weight. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice had the specific temperature of a man who is not sorry at all. "Did you have something to add?" "The third node," Jade said again. "The warehouse in the secondary cluster. Your model is treating it as a primary hub. If the capacity assumption is wrong, if someone entered an estimate instead of a verified figure, that's where the contradiction in your regional outputs is coming from." Douglas Whitmore tilted his head. Slowly, the way a man tilts his head when he is deciding how to respond to something that has surprised him but that he does not intend to show has surprised him. "And you are," he said. Not a question. A request for information that also functioned as a reminder that she had not been asked to speak. "Jade Osei, I'm here to see someone in building services." She paused. "I used to coordinate logistics for the 82nd Airborne." The woman in the cream blazer made a sound. It was very small, almost nothing, but Jade had spent years learning to hear small sounds in environments where small sounds mattered, and she heard it. Douglas Whitmore looked at Jade Osei. He looked at the map behind him. He looked back at Jade. "The third node," he said. "Third from the left." Blue marker. The model assumes 42% utilization. If the actual figure is lower, even by 10 points, the redistribution math fails at every downstream junction. That's why your 3 models are giving you 3 different timelines. They're all building on the same bad assumption. There was a silence. It was not the kind of silence that exists before someone speaks. It was the kind that exists when a room full of people is doing the same calculation at the same time, and the calculation is coming out in a way they did not expect. A woman in the second row, young, laptop open, the posture of someone who had been working for 36 hours, said, very quietly, "That's weight." Her fingers moved. "That's the Decatur facility. It was flagged for a capacity review 8 months ago," another voice said. From somewhere in the middle section. The review findings were filed in a subfolder under the old project code. A third voice said, "They never got merged into the current model." The room shifted. The kind of collective shift that happens when something clicks. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with that specific quiet momentum of a thing falling into place. Douglas Whitmore stood very still at the front of the room. He was not a man who stood still. Jade could tell from the way the room oriented itself around him that stillness was not his default. He moved, he directed, he was the engine. Right now he was standing still. "Pull the Decatur capacity report," he said, to no one in particular and to everyone in the room. "Current figures, not projections." He paused. "Do it now." The room moved. Laptops opened. People reached for phones. The energy was different now. Still urgent, but with direction. There is a specific quality to the movement of a room that has been given an answer. Even if the answer is not solved yet, even if it only points toward the next step, there is something that opens up. Jade stood up. She had not planned to stay this long. "Wait," said the woman in the second row, who had not looked up from her laptop. "The Decatur utilization is at 29%. Not 42. 29. 13 points lower than the model assumed. Applied across 6 downstream junctions, across 11 hospital networks, across an 11-day timeline. It didn't just explain the contradiction, it explained every contradiction. The wrong timelines, the failed optimization, the contingency routing that kept looping back on itself." A man in the front row said, "Oh my God," not loudly, almost to himself. It was the kind of thing people say when they have been sitting very close to an answer for a very long time, and someone has just moved the single object that was blocking their view. Douglas Whitmore turned back to look at Jade. She was already pulling the visitor badge off her collar. "You should verify the report," she said, "and check the second node too, Northwest Cluster. It's probably fine, but the same project transition happened around the same time, so the data provenance is worth checking." She set the visitor badge on the arm of her chair. "I need to go. I'm late for lunch." "MZOC," Douglas said. She stopped. "How long did it take you to see that?" She thought about it. Not the question itself, which was simple. The honest answer, which was slightly less simple. "I was looking at the map for maybe 2 minutes before I said anything." Douglas nodded once, very slowly. "My team has been on this for 11 days. "Your team is very good," Jade said, and she meant it. They had the right tools and the right frameworks. The problem wasn't the analysis. The problem was one number that nobody had checked because everybody assumed somebody else had checked it. She picked up her jacket from the back of the chair. "That happens." It happens a lot, actually, especially when a team is moving fast. She said it without judgment because it wasn't a judgment. It was true. She had learned that in the army, not in classrooms, but in supply yards in the desert, where a single wrong inventory count could leave a unit without fuel or food or medical supplies. The most dangerous errors were not the complicated ones. They were the simple ones that everyone had agreed to skip past. She was almost at the door when Douglas Whitmore said, "We have an open position on our operations risk team." Jade stopped again. She had not expected that. She turned around. The room was still looking at her. 60 people who had spent 11 days on a problem she had seen in 2 minutes, and most of them did not look bothered by that. Most of them looked like people who were relieved. "I'll think about it," she said. She meant, probably not. She also meant, maybe. Douglas nodded. "I'll have someone send you the details. You don't have my contact information. We'll find it." It was the kind of thing that could have sounded threatening. The way he said it, it only sounded true. Jade Osei walked out of the conference room on the 42nd floor of the Whitmore Group building, took the elevator down to 38, and found her cousin Marcus eating a sandwich at his desk in the building services office, with his feet up and a look on his face that said he already knew something had happened. "Told you," Marcus said. "You told me nothing," Jade said. "You told me to trust you. That's not information. How'd it go?" She sat down across from him and reached for half of his sandwich she did not ask permission for, and which he had clearly already planned for, because there was an extra half sitting in the bag. "Fine," she said. "Fine like nothing happened, or fine like something happened, and you're not going to tell me about it for 3 weeks. She considered this. The second one, she said. 3 weeks later, Marcus was in the elevator at work when he saw a woman he didn't recognize step out of the 42nd floor and head toward the offices he had not been on first-name terms with since his onboarding tour. She was wearing a blazer, navy, and boots that had seen actual mud. He texted his cousin, "Is that you on 42?" The response came back in 40 seconds. "Shut up," he sent back a single emoji. The one with the little crown. She did not respond, but she also did not deny it. The Decatur capacity report was verified that afternoon. The second node checked out. Clean data, proper provenance, no transfer errors. The redistribution model was rebuilt from the corrected figure and run again at 6 p.m. that evening. It came out clean the first time. All 3 timelines aligned, the contingency routing resolved. By 9 p.m., the Whitmore group had a viable plan on paper. By the following morning, the client had signed off on implementation. By the end of that week, the first corrected supply shipment had left the Decatur facility and was moving through the network. 3 million patients got their medication on time. Nobody knew about the woman with the rubber band in her hair, who had been in that room for 6 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon, passing through on her way to lunch. The Decatur warehouse manager, when the consultants called to verify the capacity figures, said the 29% number had been sitting in the system since the review 8 months ago. Nobody had called to check. "That happens," the manager said. "A lot, actually." He sounded tired. He also sounded like a man who had been waiting for someone to ask the right question for a very long time. Some answers are not complicated. They are just unasked. They sit in subfolders under old project codes, in warehouses at 29% capacity, in the minds of people who walk into rooms they were not supposed to be in, and see the thing that does not fit. The math already knew. It was just waiting for someone to look at it.